authenticity as a writer, and I would love to hear what you think of how writers can be more consciously write more authentically, as opposed to only digging into the external well, which a lot of writers do. They just rehash old stuff that they've seen again and again and again, where I think the combination of the three, and because when you watch a movie, that's authentic. You know, you watch something that just comes from a place that you could just feel it. That the writer, the director, you know, you watch Schindler's List and you go, well, that's Spielberg doing what he, like, that is really personal. It just oozes off the screen.
Absolutely.
So what's your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on that are that, you know, when I started teaching writing, sort of about 20 years ago, I've been teaching this, and a lot of people, when they first start writing their scripts, I don't know why, but I mean, I guess I did it too, actually, probably, is like, you know, I'm going to write a story about a prostitute who meets a gangster, and then they're in, you know, and you know, I'm in South Africa, so, but in New York, and I'm like, I know nothing about New York, I know nothing about prostitutes or gangsters, right? But yet I'm going to write this thing, and then so what I do is I draw from the external source as well, so I get this half-remembered idea of a prostitute from like Pretty Woman, and then this half-remembered idea of gangsters from like Goodfellas, and then like I kind of what I know of New York, and it just, you know, it's thin. It's really thin. And, you know, you can structure it perfectly. You could even make characters that are kind of okay, but it's lacking something. And this is this authenticity thing. It's just lacking depth. And so I always thought to myself, how am I going to teach this to students? How am I going to teach people to like get depth? You know, is it something you're just born with, or what is it? And so what I realized is I used to do these exercises with them, and this is kind of where the memory thing came from. I used to do this exercise where I was like, okay, so in your life, there's been one moment where everything's changed. The one moment, something happened in your life where everything changed. And students started looking at their lives, and they'd go back and they'd go, okay, oh yeah, there was that time I was mugged. Yeah, that wasn't so nice. Or it could be anything like, there was that one moment when I realized my grandmother was going to die. And I was visiting her in the old age home, and I knew she was going to die, and she was getting dementia. And that moment was when everything changed. And I get them to write that into a script. And what they started writing were these amazing things that were just full of so much authenticity. It was like, okay, so I was mugged, but it was kind of funny the way the mugging happened. And it happened in this random place that you wouldn't think that, like, you know, outside a train station, people were walking by and this guy was mugging me and no one was doing anything. And he was just holding this knife out at me and just showing me the knife. He wasn't like threatening me. All he did was show me the knife. And I'm like, ooh. That just, suddenly it was a lot more authentic than someone taking out a gun and going, I'm mugging you now. You know,
right, yeah. On the nose, very on the nose.
Yeah, very on the nose. It was just like, I've got a knife. What are you going to do? And you know, the Alzheimer's thing was like, you know, she opens the fridge and something in the fridge has gone moldy. And everything in the fridge is moldy. So she hasn't, you know, grandmother hasn't been in the fridge for a while. She's losing it. And that moment had such authenticity. And then the students would write these scenes. And I remember, I'll never forget when the scenes are read. I make my students read out in the class, you know, so you read out your scripts because you can suddenly hear what it feels like and what it sounds like. And I'll never forget that moment after that class. The room was vibrating with this authentic energy, and people were crying and people were laughing and people were, oh man, it was like colors were popping. It was just fantastic. I had to go lie outside on the ground, and like I lay on a bench and I just watched the clouds drift by, because it was this great moment of like, okay, this is authentic. Authentic, yeah. Yeah. And so I kind of, in the book, I kind of, that's why I kind of draw so heavily on the memory well. That's where the true stuff lies. And I almost, you know, some people can write really imaginative stuff and it can be really, really fun. But if you link it up to your memories in some ways, man, you've got, that's the way you get the authenticity. I really think that's the way the authenticity comes about. And what's interesting as well, just from a writing point of view, is it's happening in television writing in some ways now. Like a lot of the TV series have got this like, it's really kind of real, either because of the research, because this is the other thing. because of that story I was talking about in New York, if I actually went to New York and kind of researched and walked around the streets and New York entered my memory well, I could have written with a lot more authenticity. You know, I always use the example of like The Wire, you know, the TV series The Wire. It's like it just had so much authenticity because those guys lived the life. You know, they were there, they were journalists, they reported on it. The guy was, you know, literally the guy who was the homicide division. He'd been there, he knew that space so well. It seeps with authenticity because the writers have activated all their 5 senses and they've lived those moments. So the idea, I think, with real authenticity is to live the moments and then put them in your script and be brave enough to put those moments in your script and to slow down in that moment of creativity and go, wait a minute. You can even revisit scripts you've written already, and you can go back and you can look at the scene and say, okay, so I wrote this breakup scene and I set it in the bedroom because that's where people break up. And look back at your own life and say, where did I break up with people? Okay, wait a minute. It was actually a sushi restaurant, or I don't know. It was like, you know, on the side of the road in the car. Oh yeah, it was in the shopping mall, in the parking in the shopping mall, in the parking lot. Oh yeah, and then you change the breakup scene from the bedroom to the parking lot, and suddenly you've got something that's fresh and unique and original. And so that's the way that you can also use the wells. And I talk about in like locations, like changing your locations, sort of locations from life. And then chopping your scene around, and then suddenly what happens is your script suddenly pops all these fresh, kind of unique, authentic. I keep saying authentic. That's not anyway. These authentic locations, yeah.
No, it's funny as you're talking, and I just did a movie that I shot at the Sundance Film Festival, and that film is my many of my stories are in it. Of like, you know, it's about filmmakers trying to sell their movie at Sundance. No one had ever done it before. And I was like, but I've been to Sundance 8 or 9 times. So I know the layout of Park City like the back of my head. So when I was writing it and putting it together, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll go over to this restaurant. We'll go over to that restaurant. We'll go into here. We got to take this trip over there. Nice. And they're like, oh, that one Sundance I went where I was completely depressed and didn't even know where I was going to go in my life. And I walked down Main Street at 3:00 in the morning and I looked like a backlot. We put that scene in, and you can sense that kind of stuff coming off the screen.
Amazing.
It's one of the things I love that I've done and ever because of that authenticity of it. Because it was it was authentic to my story, but also so many stories I'd heard before from other filmmakers that I've met or have dealt with in my life. But that's what makes those kind of stories so unique. Because, and I think you're right. The memory well, it's kind of like the secret stuff. It's the stuff that nobody, it's the thing that puts you apart from the billion of other screenwriters out there trying to get a story told.
Absolutely.
Because just like we did in the earlier exercise, I don't know of anybody else, or at least I've never seen it or heard about it, of the sound of that coffin on a plastic tray being drawn into that's something that's very uniquely mine until now, and now someone will steal it from me. But that's fine.
Of course.
But that's something extremely uniquely my story, my memory. And if we could even just dabble that stuff on, you know, a Stephen King book. Like, Stephen King puts out books left and right, but I promise you Stephen King probably has pulled a lot, like when he wrote Carrie or he wrote The Shining. There's things about everything, his family, his life, his, you know, all that stuff that's drizzled in there.
Definitely. And what's interesting is that writers do it almost unconsciously. You know, the good writers I don't know why, they just do it automatically. They just draw from their life. They just draw from their memories. It's a great process, and it's quite a liberating process. And it's actually quite a fun process. And I mean, I may even go so far as to say it's a transformative process. Because, you know, we can write, you know, from the imagination well, you can write from the memory, from the external sources well, it's already fun and it's light and it's fun. When you start writing from your own stuff and putting some of your own stuff in there, it becomes transformative, not just as a writer, but as a human being. So I find that if people write with some of their own stuff in there, first of all, the scripts are great, much better, stories are better, characters are more interesting, but the writer's experience of writing is better. It's quite amazing. If you kind of write the stuff that is somehow linked to you in some way, it's transformative. It's almost therapeutic. I mean, I'm not a therapist. I wouldn't say I am, but you know, it's like it's a little therapeutic. Yeah.
No, there's no question. You exercise some demons when you do that.
Totally. Absolutely, you do. There's a great quote in the book about something about exercising your divine discontent or something. It's in the book, one of the quotes from another writer, and it's great. You do. You exercise some demons. Yeah.
And again, it is that secret stuff. So people listening, out there, if you're able to pull from your own memories and incorporate them in a creative environment and a creative story,
yeah,
that is what's going to stick you apart from everybody else. And if you're just making that prostitute, pretty woman, Goodfellas gangster in New York, which you've never stepped foot in New York, chances are, even if you know structure extremely well, even if you know character development really well, it's going to be, like you said, very thin. But
something's missing.
But a first-time writer who lived New York. Well, that's why Martin Scorsese's movies were so amazing, like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver.
Oh man.
He lived
Raging Bull.
He lived New York. He understood the gangster lifestyle because that's the guys he hung out with.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's remarkable.
And
go ahead.
And it's the same as, what's interesting though, so Woody Allen is also New York, totally different guy, like totally same city, totally different experience, because their memories of it is so different, their experiences are so different that you have these they both feel they're tonally totally different because their memories are different of these places, but they both have authenticity, which is
also very interesting. That's a really good point, that they have both are known for their New York work, and they're both so different. So radically different experiences.
So totally, absolutely different.
Could you imagine just swapping those two in their life and just like Martin Scorsese's living Woody Allen? Now that would be an interesting movie. And Woody Allen's the gangster.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be amazing.
Woody Allen character walks into a Martin Scorsese movie, and suddenly he's like, "Oh, hey, sorry, what did I?"
How am I a clown? Well, you're a clown because.